me to announce the winners. And so congratulations to Jim Nocella and Cliff Ashna for completing 6 trips in the current year. They are both winning the first 2 of 12 Organizer Challenge Awards. So congratulations to Jim and Cliff. Now, feature presentation, Pack Rafting at Southwest BC by Cam Fenton. So without further ado, I will pass the, the Zoom to Cam. Welcome, Cam.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Cam. I live up in Squamish, on the territory of the Squamish and Loloit Nation. And I'm going to be talking for a bit. And then my buddy Sam, who's also joining from Mount Waddington, who is the Alpaca distributor for Canada, will also be joining. So we can talk about gear and answer any questions folks have about packrafting. Sam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sounds sorry, Cam, you're breaking up, at least from my end for a minute there. If everyone can see me, yeah, I'm Sam Waddington. I live in Chilliwack, and I'm currently up in Vernon skiing at the moment. So bear with me if the reception's bad here, but yeah, happy to be with you all tonight, and feel free to punt questions our way, and we're happy to answer what we can.
Awesome. So I'm just going to start my screen share. Sec. So this takes a minute. Presentation mode. Cool. So I'm going to be talking about packrafting, mostly in southwestern BC. There are some stories and little pieces in here from further afield, other parts of the province and Alaska. But wanted to talk mostly about, trips, given kind of the state of the world we've been in for a while. Wanted to focus in, rather than kind of some of the bigger expedition type things, on trips I've done and sort of uses for packrafts within a few hours of Vancouver, and sort of the kind of trips that can be done over a couple days or a weekend or a long weekend, and some of the different uses we found for packrafts down here. So my introduction to packrafting starts a good number of years ago, up in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska, which is where this photo is from. This is in front of the Brooks Range. And a friend of mine, Malcolm, and I had gone up there with grand visions and grand ambitions of this 5-week-long sea kayaking expedition along the coast of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to the Yukon border. Then we were going to hike inland, find the porcupine caribou herd, take photos, do all this stuff. We were like sponsored by Patagonia. We had this whole big idea. And so we land in this little town of Kaktovik, and we unload. And we realized that we planned to start our trip probably about three weeks early for what the sea ice was doing that year. And we get there, we put together our folding expedition kayak, and we realized that the ocean is entirely still frozen, which presents us with 2 problems. One, we're in a collapsible folding sea kayak that is decidedly not ice-worthy. So if this thing were to get stuck between 2 pieces of ice, we'd have a huge problem. And 2, when the ice doesn't go out, neither do the polar bears. And so we rolled in, and the first thing we saw when we got off the plane was a bunch of people standing around with rifles that were there as polar bear patrol, making sure that bears didn't come when people were unloading the mail from the planes. So we had a problem. So we ended up deciding we're going to wait a couple weeks and try the trip a little shorter version. So we hiked into the Brooks Range, waited a couple weeks, got some great photos, found the porcupine caribou, had a good time. But we come back, and we put our kayak together, and we start paddling, and we run right into the ice again in about 45 minutes. And so we go back, and we're sitting in this hotel in Kaktovik, kind of dejected. Our trip has ended. We've spent days like quadruple hauling hundreds of pounds of gear, and we're sitting there kind of dejected. That sort of feeling when a trip doesn't go really well. And this group of people walk in, and they walk in with backpacks, like in this photo. These are actually photos from some friends we made that were out there. Packrafting. And so they walk in with these backpacks and they've got their paddles sticking off of them. They've got these huge smiles on, and we're just sitting there eating these like $30 grilled cheese sandwiches because our flight's also delayed because the fog has rolled in. And so we're just waiting to be able to get on a plane, and they roll in and they're like high-fiving. They've had this amazing trip. They just did this huge traverse of the Brooks Range in 10 days. They like visited hot springs, had this amazing time, and they've got these tiny packs, and like they put their packs down beside our like 500 pounds of gear. And I'm immediately like, what have I done wrong? Like, what is this thing? Where are your boats? So we started asking them, and they start telling us about packrafting and this trip they had done, traversing the Brooks Range, running the Okapeluk River, and this amazing thing. And I was like, okay, I've got a month left in Alaska, 2 months left in Alaska. I am going to figure out what this is, learn how to do it, and that's the entire remaining purpose of my trip in Alaska. So I ended up spending the rest of that summer traveling around Alaska, living in a van, packrafting as much as possible. These are a few photos from that. Some of them are mine, some of them are from friends of mine. But sort of going around, taking packrafting courses, hanging out with the folks at Kennecott Wilderness Guides, which is like a kind of packrafting mecca in McCarthy, Alaska, where some of these photos are from, where they hold a packrafting race every summer, where you have to run up and over this sort of like 5-mile mountain pass, and then you drop down into a class 4 river, and it loops you back to town, and then you sprint to the bar, which is the finish line, and getting just like amazed and enthralled with these little boats and just all the different things and all the cool trips and all the amazing kind of traverses and link ups and access and different things that these boats would let us do. And so this was, and as I was doing it, I like started hanging out and talking with a lot of the sort of like originators of packrafting in Alaska. So folks like Roman Dial, and like these guys who really sort of like pushed the limits of what these boats were designed for and why they existed. And I can't remember who it was, but one of them had a great term for it, is that a packraft is a poor man's bush plane. And their way they explained it was like, there's not many roads in Alaska, but a lot of rivers. And with a packraft, you can move far faster than a river than you could bushwhacking overland. And so they gave you access and the ability to access all of these new things. So as I came back home to BC and I looked at similar maps, I was like, oh, we do have some more roads, but we also have a lot of water. We're one side of it is surrounded by ocean, a lot of rivers, huge amounts of amazing kind of existing front country rivers, but all of this amazing backcountry potential where there's like rivers and lakes. And suddenly, you know, it started to activate my brain thinking about what can we do now when these rivers and lakes are no longer obstacles, but actually like objectives or goals or like things we can use to get around. And that sort of got really sort of sparked the way packrafts are creative tools. And so wanted to talk about a few of the different ways you can use them. And so Mark, who I think is also on this call, I heard Mark and I last summer finally finished a trip that I've been looking at for a couple of years, which is Upper Loloit Provincial Park, which for folks who don't know it, is if you drive up the Loloit River Road until you run out of road at a hydro site, there is a provincial park there. There is an old trail that I think was built by the BCMC that goes about 1.5 kilometers in. But in order to get on this old trail, the first thing you have to do is a Tyrolean traverse across Salal Creek. And then you get about 1 kilometer of trail that leads you into about, 2 or 3 kilometers of, thigh and knee deep icy marsh walking, which then takes you into the worst bushwhacking I have ever done in my entire life. So to give you a sense of what this trip was like, is it took us 2.5 days to hike in. But then to give you a sense of how packrafts, how great and fast they are, it took us 2.5 hours to raft the entire way back out to our car. So you can see some of the bushwhacking in one of Mark's great photos on the right there. But it kind of takes you far back and it lets you explore hard and very seldom visited parts of the province. So, this is within a few hours of Vancouver, and a park that, probably less than 50 people go to every year. And there's just some amazing country back there. There's that waterfall kind of up on the right. I don't think this photo really does it justice, but there's this amazing waterfall kind of buried in the woods back there that's surrounded by these columns. It looks like it's something straight out of the Lord of the Rings. But yeah, and then it like lets you get back there. And so something that had we not had boats would have taken us maybe, 4 or 5 days in terms of getting in and getting out, took us 2.5 because the boats let us do such a quick exit. And the river was super fun. Some really great kind of class 2 boogie water, a little bit of rapids, things like that. And there's some fun class 3 rapids further up. And this also, more and more I've been thinking about it, this could be a really cool kind of ski rafting trip if you're able to kind of gain that ridge line, drop down to the glacier in the back there, and then you could still use the river as an exit, as a route to exit. Another one that folks might be familiar of, and this is sort of like another use of pack rafts, is that when I started pack rafting, they were sort of considered to be basically like glorified pool toys. Like sometimes they'd be referred to as Kmart rafts with like $1,000 worth of durability. But as especially Alpaca has really pushed the design of them, they've become really capable whitewater machines. So there was a time, especially when I started, where pack rafts were sort of seen only as a tool to facilitate like a big trip. So you would use it to kind of get down the river, but the river wasn't the reason for going. But more and more as they've become like much more kind of whitewater functional machines or boats, because there's nothing mechanical about them, but the river becomes like a reason to go. So you can link up a lot of different things, but like there's oftentimes some of the most fun trips I've gone on, the river is actually the best part. So a lot of folks might have been up here. I mean, it's not a super popular area, but it is a beautiful, stunning, amazing kind of zone, very close to the Upper Loloit Provincial Park. There's Althany Pass or Salal Creek, but there's also, with a pack raft, you can turn the exit into this amazing kind of, fun creek boating run. It's pretty challenging, but gives you this like really surreal, amazing experience of whitewater paddling in a like near tree line, sub tree line, kind of nearly alpine environment with some of the most beautiful, stunning scenery around. These are some more photos, kind of hiking in, coming out of Althany Pass, kind of Salal Creek area. This is another one, and this is sort of like thinking about, again, boats as like the river is the reason to go. So folks probably know where Meager Creek is. There's the old hot springs up there, a lot of cool terrain around it, the Harrison Hut kind of up above it. But I don't have a lot of great photos of this because I didn't take a good camera, also because the river itself is quite technical and challenging. But Meager Creek is this other really cool, amazing spot where the landslide that came down about 10 years ago changed the shape of the river and created this amazing, super fun, challenging, kind of consistent class 4 whitewater run. And there was really no other way to get a boat into it. Because when we were in this, the only way in was the VOC trail. I think now there's a new road that's been pushed in that might make access a fair bit easier. But one of the reasons I put this in is because also I think like Meager Creek and this whole area creates the potential for some really interesting trips and traverses. So if you could imagine thinking about if we're able to, clear and refurbish the old Stoltman wilderness route, the Meager or the Ilaho to Meager trail, you could create this really amazing backcountry hiking and pack rafting route that would take you from the Squamish and Ilaho River Valley into Meager Creek, and then you could raft Meager Creek into the Loloit all the way down to Pemberton, and probably do that entire thing in about 5 days. So switching gears a little bit, another thing that I've really found amazing around pack rafting in BC is bike rafting. So for better or worse, I often feel conflicted about this, but we have a lot of logging and resource roads in our province. And especially down near the Sea to Sky kind of, and in the Fraser Valley, we have a lot of these gravel and dirt roads and a lot of big rivers near them too. And so we have the ability to do these really cool link ups, explore, and use multiple modes of transportation to cover a lot of ground quickly. And so one of my favorite routes, partly because it starts literally out my back door, is the Squamish Cheakamus Divide bike rafting route, which doesn't exactly follow the same version of this as I think folks might have seen in the Squamish Cheakamus Divide ski touring route, but you basically can leave out of Squamish in an overnight route, kind of climb up all the way to Chance Creek, cross over a low pass between Cloudburst and Tricuni, drop down, and then the next day be able to float out the Squamish River past kind of beautiful waterfalls, see the Ashlew, the Squamish, and the Tantalus Range from kind of angles that you'd never be able to see them, and also like get down in the river and see there's a lot of often amazing wildlife sightings, see like very cool things within here. And folks have done sort of versions of this trip, also skiing. There's an episode of the podcast, the Dirt Bag Diaries, and a few things have been written about some folks that did a version of this where they did it in kind of spring of last year, I believe. And they rafted down some of the Cheakamus, climbed and skied Cloudburst, and then floated out the Squamish back to town here. And so these are other ones. This route's also up on bikepacking.com where I put it, but it's a really amazing weekend route. And for like someone who lives in Squamish, who spent huge amounts of time here, doing this route and this trip, it was like really cool to see somewhere that I thought I knew really well from a very different perspective. And it really brought sort of that idea of like how a pack raft and multiple modes of transportation can cover so much terrain in a short period of time and really see things from very different angles. This is another one taking us out of Southwest BC, but this is definitely also a trip that's doable in kind of a long weekend if you time your drive right and you got the right weather. But folks might know where Howes Pass is. The Howes Peak is like has some really amazing, challenging alpine climbing on it. And there's some other cool things here, but Howes Pass is there's actually an old heritage site, like a historical marker. Is in the middle of nowhere on the Continental Divide between Alberta and BC, and it's sort of this forgotten about historical marker that's for a long time been blocked because the sections of the Continental Divide Trail from the Banff National Park side is just so overgrown, and the national park won't manage it. But in the last few years, some volunteers on the BC side from Golden have actually worked on the trail on that side, and you can fairly easily get up it from Golden up the Blaeberry River Road up into Howes Pass, and you can bike the whole thing. And then once you get across it and enter the national park, you can get right on the river. And it's probably one of the most stunning, kind of fairly easy. It's pretty much all class 1, just wilderness float. There's a bit of a technical class 2 section at the beginning, which is very easy, but it's just pretty fast and can be somewhat intimidating. But once you get into it, it's this like amazing kind of day-long float through the stunning scenery of the Rocky Mountains. And again, it's the sort of thing where you can cover this ground and cover this territory that it's hard to do on foot, because as soon as you get over that pass on foot, bushwhacking out the rest of the Continental Divide Trail is pretty miserable. And being able to cover, this route, even if you add in, there's about if you want to do it the way I did, which involved biking all the way back out to Lake Louise to catch a bus back to Golden, it's about 180 kilometers of biking and rafting, but it's doable in 2 days. So I did this basically. I started on a Friday afternoon, and I was finished and back at my car by Sunday afternoon. And so you can cover this amazing amount of terrain, and through this kind of transformer tool. Another one that I did with a bike, you could also definitely hike this one, is there's the Mythical Squamish to Sunshine Coast route, which I think is often talked about as something existing. But there's a few pieces of the trail or the route that are not yet built and are pretty impassable. But a pack raft actually lets you get around them fairly easily. So this one, again, it's like I started on a Friday afternoon rolling out of Squamish and was finished and back home by, late in the day on Sunday. And so I know for this one, there's 2 major sections of the Squamish to Sunshine Coast Trail that are not yet built, and they're very hard to pass. Mixture of like really nasty bushwhacking, or another one you actually have to kind of like pick your way along a shoreline. But with a pack raft and a couple of transitions, this becomes a really doable route and a way to sort of, again, cover a lot of ground and see a lot of amazing things in a period of time that if you were just doing this, if you're doing without it, wouldn't be possible. And I think like that's part of the reason I like bike rafting as well, is you get to cover a lot of ground a lot of quickly, but you're not going so fast that you don't have time to kind of enjoy and experience everything. So we want to talk a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of introduce this, and let me hand it off to Sam to say a few things. We want to kind of use this as a chance to answer questions, but also like give kind of basics of like, how do you do this? This photo is from one of my misadventures in Alaska where we lost a paddle blade off one of our paddles, and I had to raft out a class 3 river using a shoe tied to a paddle blade as my paddle. Not recommended. And this is not the right way to gear up for a pack rafting trip or the right way to save weight, just as a flag. But there are a lot of cool ways to save weight and a lot of things to do. So as I said, like pack rafts when they started, the photo on the left, this is sort of like the OG pack raft. It was like super stubby, short. Your backpack got strapped to the top. The spray deck was kind of weird. The PFDs that people would wear were like whatever you could find, or sometimes not a PFD. It worked, but like they were not really boats designed to have fun on the river. So like if you ever paddled an OG pack raft, you were usually like pretty happy when you got off the river because you were like, cool, I survived that. The photo on the right, this is a photo from Luke Mell, who's like a pretty well-known pack rafter in Alaska, but this is them pack rafting in the Grand Canyon. And so these boats now have like been designed in such a way that they can handle, you know, some of the gnarliest whitewater in the world and also be really fun. And they have a much easier learning curve for whitewater than a hard-shelled kayak. So I know there's some folks on this that I think I saw that have done the intro to pack rafting course I've done at the BCMC a couple times. And hopefully I could tell you, it's like, some people have come into those courses never having sat in a boat before and come out of them having like a degree of comfort paddling class 3 whitewater, which is pretty remarkable for what these boats let you to do and give you that sense of, you know, that ability to like think about and push yourself in sort of interesting and cool adventures. And so I'm gonna leave it here. So like this is, when I started, the only boats that were available were that one on the far left, the Alpaca Classic. This is now the Alpaca line, which has a whole bunch of boats made for very specific purposes or very general purposes. And so I think I might hand it over to Sam because he is the boat expert. And so Sam, do you wanna talk a little bit about like the world of pack rafts? I'm gonna stop my screen share so I can see.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for the intro, Cam. And yeah, I mean it's actually interesting. I too got my start to pack rafting in Alaska, paddling some pretty nasty rivers. And anyone who's ever done a portage, which is also a micro adventure, like with a canoe or a hard shell boat through alder jungle on the shoreline of something, is eager to entertain the idea that there might be a better way to get the business done. So we were using them for exits off of ski trips down carry, which is why they're applicable for bike packing and other things and really long expeditions. So yeah, I mean, to talk about the rafts a little bit, they've come a really long way. And so if you have experience in a pack raft or kind of you know, perspective, we'd like to kind of put some of that to rest, because these are some of the most remarkable boats that allow for you to do just about anything that you want to do. So they come in tandem models. There's what have
Oh no, I think we lost Sam because I think you're back.
Am I back?
Yeah, you might want to turn off your video. I feel like your internet connection might be making it a bit robot-y.
All right, sorry about that, team. Is that sounding better there, Cam?
Yeah, it's great.
Oh, okay, sounds good. Sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, so I mean, there's basically a pack raft to suit every single need. So as Cam mentioned, you know, those OG style ones, they've taken that concept and made those even better. So the lightest pack raft in Alpaca's line comes in at just over 3 pounds and packs up the size of about a 1.5 liter Nalgene bottle. So you can get across any body of water. You can cross little rivers midway through big traverses, these types of things, and they're awesome. And for myself, I use them for paragliding exits as well. So I bring them paragliding in case you get put down next to a spot you need to exit from. So those areas are awesome. And then right through to full whitewater boats, and Alpaca has boats in their line that can comfortably paddle just about the hardest whitewater in the world, class 4, class 5, and beyond. Some of the best paddlers in the world are now pushing the limits of what's possible. A lot of folks may think about, how to strap gear to the boats. They've remedied that situation by building zippers inside the boats. You can store up to 100 liters of gear in some of the single boats, and 200 liters of gear inside some of the tandem models. So really versatile options for long trips and expeditions, and really just getting yourselves out there. So the lightest boats, just over 3 pounds. Heaviest boat, we're getting into about 12 pounds. And those are all options that are on the table. And yeah, I mean, I obviously could go on for days about pack rafting in general, but would be happy to open up to a little bit of Q&A as well if people have questions about boats. And
So I guess for anyone who has questions, maybe you can send it through chat, and I'm sure Cam and Sam will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I am back online. I keep cutting out, but absolutely punt your questions over and we're happy to answer them.
Okay, it seems that the first question is from Robin. I'm interested in taking my dog on flat water. Is this a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're producing a bunch of video content right now as well, just to kind of give folks a better idea. But these boats are remarkably durable. They can handle your dog all day, not a problem. And so there are boats that are kind of 1 person plus. So if you're paddling with your dog all the time, there's boats that are built for kind of a 1 person plus a dog or plus a kid kind of is the concept. So something like or whatever for a shorter paddle, any of the boats can handle it.
Great, thanks, Sam. A question from Philip. What sort of speed can you get on open water?
Yeah, in flat water, there are obviously a bunch of factors, like headwind, things like that. You're probably looking at like maxing out at, depending on how strong a paddler you are, between 2 and 5 kilometers an hour is probably like the fastest you're going to get going on flat water. And that depends on like how flat water is. So like sea state, if you're on the ocean, headwinds, tailwinds. If you're paddling them on flat water, it's good to think about just like the one thing about a pack raft is the boat is short and has a very low draft. So the boat doesn't compensate for you the way a canoe or a kayak does. Like a sea kayak, you can like do a big, huge stroke in. And the fact that the boat is like 14 to 18 feet long, it tracks you forward. A pack raft will like flop back and forth. And so you have to kind of train a pack rafting stroke, which is shorter and faster to get it really going. But at the end, a lot of the time pack rafters will curse flat water. So for example, there's huge potential in sort of the Pitt River. So the backside of Garibaldi Park, there's this amazing river. It's kind of class 3, class 4. The drawback and the thing that keeps people from doing the Pitt River as a pack rafting trip regularly is that there is a 30-kilometer tidal lake at the end of it in Pitt Lake. And so most people myself included, don't want to do that trip unless we can get picked up by a water taxi, because the idea of paddling that lake, particularly in a whitewater pack raft, is going to be difficult. But also, as Sam said, if you're thinking about if you're aiming more towards you're going to be paddling more flat water, a longer boat is going to do a better job for you. So things like the Caribou, the Explorer, some of those longer boats are going to be better suited to a flat water scenario than whitewater boats, which have a stubbier whitewater shaped hull that aren't going to track as well in flat water.
Yeah, for sure. And just one thing I would add to that too is that, pack rafts are all about pros and cons. So one of the main benefits of a pack raft is how little it drafts and these types of things, right? So you can paddle the boniest little shallow rivers, these types of environments, but that means that it doesn't track as well. So as a comparison, for those of you maybe not as familiar with what 5 kilometers an hour looks like on the water. At similar exertion for the paddler compared to sitting in a reasonable sea kayak or a canoe, you're at about 30 to 50% of the same efficiency moving on the water. And that's, yeah, but we do have, we've got folks in BC who have paddled from Port Hardy to Alaska. So, like Skagway, Alaska, like a long way. So they can do big flat water trips, but you want to pick the right boat for sure.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. From Ernetti, there are two questions here. The first one is, can you recommend some good resources to find out the class of various rivers or a good guidebook?
Yeah, so the best guidebook is currently out of print, which is Whitewater in Southwest BC. Last I heard, it was like in the lineup for a print run, but it got hit by the like COVID book printer problem that happened last year, and so it still hasn't come through. But once that is out, that is the best like actual physical guidebook for Southwest BC. It's got all of the Sea to Sky rivers, Fraser Valley rivers, and then like North Van all over. I posted a link in there that's got a few other ones. So BC Whitewater has some good beta, but BC Whitewater tends to cater more to like high-end whitewater kayakers. So it's got a lot more class 4, class 5 runs. Paddling maps is it's a new-ish resource, but it was originated out of Alberta, but it's starting to get populated with some BC rivers and Sea to Sky stuff. I've added a few kind of test packrafting sections of rivers to it. So the Upper Loloit, Meager Creek, a couple others are on there now, so I added them. My website, that's overstoker.com, has like it's really out of date, but it's got beta on it, particularly for a lot of like class 2 or 3 packrafting type rivers around. And then the Facebook groups, Packraft Canada, and then there's a whole range of whitewater groups and clubs. So there's the Vancouver Kayak Club that I think is now called the Vancouver Whitewater Club. There's Fraser Valley Whitewater. There's Squamish Whitewater, Whistler Whitewater. All of those also will have good beta and are also similar to like the South Coast Touring page, but a little less snarky. If you go and ask questions, usually you'll get an answer in there. And there's also a couple more generic ones. So there's a new packrafting guidebook from Luke Mell called the Packrafting Handbook that's going to be coming out in May. That's a good sort of like overall kind of thing. Yeah, those are probably your best bets.
Okay, and of course the next question everybody would be interested is, will you be offering the Intro to Packrafting course again this year?
Yeah, which I think we can double answer with the Fraser Valley Ascent question, which is yes. And we're hopefully going to be running them with Ascent guides. Sam, you want to say a few words?
Sure. Yeah, there's been an increasing demand for these as well. So we've actually been building out some curriculum, Cam and I, as well as with some of the folks from Rescue Canada. They're sort of the leading swiftwater certifier agency, training agency in Canada, and actually one of the leading agencies in the world. They train all over the world, like national military forces. They train the Prime Minister's National Guard, that type of stuff. So we're developing curriculum that's specific to packrafting, taking what Cam has learned from his courses and his teaching through the BCMC and elsewhere, as well as sort of best practices from sort of around the world. This sport changes monthly, if not sooner than that. We're picking up pieces throughout. So every course you take will kind of be new, but basically we're going to run multiple different courses. There'll be everything from brief little intro courses online that give you a broad overview of whitewater, at least gets you aware of the risks and some of the techniques, these types of things. There's going to be a whole host of instructional videos, which anyone can access. And I feel like I might be cutting out here. And as well, there will be a whole host of the intro courses. Those are all becoming online by the end of the month.
Excellent, thank you. And then the next question from Maya: what are the range of costs associated with getting into packrafting? Cam or Sam?
Sam, you want to take this one?
Sorry, do you want to repeat that question? I punted out for a minute there. Sorry.
What are the range of costs associated with getting into packrafting?
Yeah, so with the exception of like the novelty boats, like the Scout, like these ultra light boats, if you actually want to get into pack rafting, there's two ways to do it. Well, three maybe. Bag, borrow, and steal a pack raft, which is first. But the next is that we do rent the boats, and it's been a growing demand. We ship them Canada wide, so if you want to do a trip to the Yukon, we'll ship them to you up there. Rates are really reasonable. They're designed to get people into the sport. So 50, 60 bucks a day for a weekend rental, not including shipping. So we can ship it to the Yukon. You can paddle a 5-day river, ship it back. You're going to be at like 50 bucks a day. So a reasonable way to get into the sport, or at least try it, or on one of the courses. But if you want to purchase a boat, baseline, basically, you can look online. There's some used boats right now with COVID. It's really tough. And we're going to be trying to promote some of those used boats as people upgrade, but you're looking at about $1,000 as the baseline. If you want a whitewater skirt and some of these types of, features that gets you into expedition pack rafting, you're probably looking at more like $1,500 to $2,000. And that's a top tier, right off the line, new model boat, but that's the range. And then you can paddle them with any paddle on the market. These types of things, you can play around with, with 4-piece carbon paddles or not. You can work with other PFDs, but each of those prices are a little bit more understandable in the market. Those are all standard pricing.
Okay, great, thank you. And here's a question for you, Cam. Are you going to be the instructor with FV accent?
I think Sam answered that. I will hopefully be one of them once we get everything sorted out.
Yeah, Cam's the boss hog out there. So yeah, he's the most experienced probably packraft instructor in the province at this point. And yeah, we'll be working with Cam as much as possible. And there'll be a few other instructors when Cam's got his own trips on the agenda, I think.
Okay. And a question from Paulina: is it possible to packraft the Nahani River?
Yes, I was actually doing a bunch of research about this a couple days ago. It's definitely possible to packraft the Nahani. There's a number of ways to do it. So the easiest and most straightforward is obviously just to do the same logistics as if you were doing like a canoe trip or a raft trip, which is you get flown into one of the lakes. There's a starting point. You follow the main kind of South Nahani River guide and go through it. But obviously the benefit of a pack raft for like a really standard version like that is that your portage around Virginia Falls and other spots is going to be way easier than if you're hauling a huge boat. But there's also a bunch of other ways to do it that folks have done. So it's possible to hike in from the Yukon side. There's a mine kind of up at the end of the Nahani Range Road. And folks have hiked in from that to a number of different feeder creeks. So there's like Broken Skull Creek, which has a great name. For I feel like it's one of those things. It's named after what probably happened to someone at some point in time. But there's a number of feeder creeks and others. And yeah, so those get you into different spots. The Nahani itself is class 2 to 3. So it's like a fairly moderate river. Once you get into some of these feeder creeks or the further up headwaters of the Nahani, you're dealing with like class 4 up to class 5 canyons that may need to be portage, a lot more dangerous water. So there's a lot more like technical water paddling stuff once you get into some of them. But there's actually now, as of a couple of years ago, there's a whole section on the Parks Canada website about Nahani, just about packrafting. So I just dropped the link into the chat.
Sorry, Cam. Yeah, one other thing I would mention is like to give you an idea about maybe how beneficial packrafting is for the Nahani. Parks Canada purchased the Tandem Forager Alpaca rafts, and that's what they run their compliance and enforcement branch pack rafting with, is the Forager, because they can haul 1,200 pounds worth of gear, 2 people, and all your gear for a multi-week trip, and they run that trip nonstop. The other thing to think about, and the Nahani is just a good example of maybe why to talk about this, it opens up trips that otherwise wouldn't be possible. So Cam's talked a lot about like access, and we kind of joked about the poor man's bush plane. But in Alaska, the rich bush plane man, he used the packraft as a you know, as an additional toy. So just thinking about some of these trips that are classically accessed with a float plane access drop at a lake or something like this, pack rafts are really light. So when you're paying for weight on your loads, or you're at maximum 4 loads, anyone who's ever hired a heli or any of these things knows the relevance of that. Having a lightweight boat, which is why Parks Canada went that route, is really helpful as well in keeping your costs down in the long term if you're accessing remote places.
Great, thank you. A question from Zoran is Paca and how much?
Oh man. So fair warning, Sam and I are both biased.
Yeah. Let me take a stab at this just for a sec, Cam, just because I need to put this on the table. Like, we're the Canadian, and Cam mentioned this out front, like, we're the Canadian dealer of Alpaca Raft. So full disclosure. But what I can say is I've been a pack rafter for 15 years, and I've been in Alpaca and Kokopelli. I chose to carry Alpaca rafts early, and Kokopelli didn't really exist at that time. And over the years, Alpaca certainly has been the best innovator in the space. That is without question. But are they the best quality, and are they the best designs on an ongoing basis? You know, there's all kinds of conversations down that realm. But we chose not to carry Kokopelli and to stay only with Alpaca, even though we had the choice to carry both. Just as a
Maybe we lost Sam again for a second. Yeah, I like the honest answer. So my first pack raft was a Kokopelli. Both companies make great boats. Oh, you're back. Cool.
No, go ahead, Cam.
Okay. Both companies make great boats. And I think like the best way to think about it is like, and some of them have like better pieces than others. Like there's little things about Kokopellis that I like better than Alpaca, and vice versa. But I think the main difference when it comes down to it is that Alpaca boats they come in more variable options. So if you're looking for a specific tool for a specific kind of adventure, like a boat for bike rafting, Kokopelli doesn't make a bike rafting specific boat, or like a high-end whitewater boat. Where Alpaca has specific models for that. The other thing is that Kokopellis are all one size fits all, whereas Alpacas are sized. So especially if you're like a smaller or a bigger person, you're probably going to find a boat that fits you better from Alpaca, just because they're actually sized to you. So like my partner is fairly short, and she was always struggling in a Kokopelli boat because it was too much boat for her size as a person. And when she got a properly sized Alpaca, her paddling got significantly better and she got way more comfortable in the boat. Or me, as like someone who's like 6'3", a Kokopelli boat was fine. But once I got into like a properly sized Alpaca whitewater boat, it like took me back to like, oh, like, you know, I have a background in whitewater kayaking. I was like, this feels like my kayak did, much more so. So I think it's like the biggest difference you're going to come down to is that like the ability to fit it to yourself, and whether you're looking for like a general purpose or a specific purpose boat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would say there's like way less variation if you want to roll out an English bay and watch the sunset with a glass of wine, and you live in a small apartment and you need something small to fit on your shelf, which, you know, like these types of use cases, or you just want to go check out little lakes and stuff, buy whatever boat you need to. And Alpaca has boats that fit that, but like Kokopelli has great boats as well. The one consideration is some of these boats have features. So we've talked about the cargo fly, which is this ability to store gear inside the hull, and like the whitewater decks. From Alpaca, you can retrofit your boat. So if you buy if you buy a boat and you buy it with an open configuration, meaning it's just like a dinghy style, and in a year you want to get into whitewater paddling, you can send your boat back and get a whitewater deck installed. And it's done at the factory that manufactured it in the first place. Whereas Kokopelli is made overseas, Alpaca is made in the US. So these features are being used by a lot of our customers, and it's definitely a nice benefit.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Question from Philip: for more water-focused trips, what's the pro and con of pack rafts versus floatable kayaks like the Oru kayaks?
I think your biggest pros on the pack rafting side are going to be durability. So like pack rafts are like, it is hard to wreck them. Like one is like they're, you roll them up, pull them out, inflate them. Whereas in my experience, like Oru kayaks or folding kayaks often have a lot of moving pieces, and are often heavier because of it. And so I think that's the second one, is like a pack raft is almost always going to be smaller and lighter than a folding kayak. So even like the smallest Oru is still a fairly big boat. So it's just going to be easier. I think like the benefit of a folding kayak is that it's going to track better in flat water. So I think that would be the biggest difference. So it's like if you are only paddling, a folding kayak or a collapsible kayak might be a better boat for you. But if you're doing any kind of portaging, hauling the boat around or any kind of mixed thing, I think that like a pack raft is going to be a much more useful option. But it will be a little slower in the flat water paddling.
Okay, great. Another question, Sam, which pack raft do you rent out for the intro river course?
Yeah, just in case I get cut off here, I'll be quick. We rent all of the boats, every model in almost every size. So everything from the highest end whitewater boats that would cost a few $1,000 right through to the Scout, that's really small, and we rent any of them. So you can choose a higher end whitewater boat to rent, or you can choose a more basic boat.
But Tim, if someone were coming in and just like give me a boat for the pack rafting course, probably would be an Expedition.
Yeah. So the Expedition is the best all-around boat that they make. It's the boat I chose as my like number one quiver of one type boat. And it is the most popular boat in their line now. Yeah. And if you're really into whitewater and you come from a whitewater background, you might flex into some of the other boats, but the vast majority of our folks in the courses are going to be in an Expedition with a whitewater deck on it, and you're going to have a boat that performs well in whitewater, but also you're not learning on a boat you wouldn't actually purchase or wouldn't actually take on bigger trips and expeditions when you need it to be versatile.
Great. Okay, there's a comment. I guess it seems that that's all the question. Any other questions? It sounds like there's a lot of interest in this new activity. Any other questions? Oh, there's one question for Sam. Let me see if I missed any. Sam, just a follow-up question. I hear you rent out all the Alpaca rafts. Does this mean you rent the Forager? Is Sam still here? Can you answer for Sam, Cam?
I don't actually know. My guess, like as Sam said, I'm pretty sure they have every boat in their rental fleet, and my understanding is that will include the Forager, as well as there's a new Alpaca model called the Ranger, which is like a smaller version of the Forager. So I think those will both be available. And similar, Zoran, if you're just talking about class 1 water, like rivers or flat water, the Caribou is probably going to be your best boat for bike fishing. I've got a Caribou. So the photos from all of my bike rafting trips, those are all the Caribou. And it's a great one because it's got the front end is specifically designed to take a bike. So it's got a big kind of flat blunt end, which makes mounting the bike on the boat way easier. And also it gets the bike away from you. So for paddling, that makes it easier. So you're not clipping the bike with your paddle, but also for fishing, it'll give you a lot more kind of space to, do anything you need to do, casting or otherwise. So those would be it. If you wanted even more space, you'd want to look at like the Mule or the Forager or the Ranger once it comes out. Question about inflation. You don't have to carry a pump. So they use a bag system. So if anyone has one of like the newer models of a thermarest, you've seen a version of it. Just basically it's like a bag, it screws onto the valve. You just kind of grab air, fold it up and squeeze it in. It's weird to get used to, but once you get used to it, you can inflate those boats in less than 5 minutes. So it's kind of like a huge version of that thermarest thing.
Yeah, what I would say, sorry, I keep cutting in, guys. The only thing I would add to that is the pumps are awesome for whitewater boats and load carry boats and the tandem boats. For like really top end pressure performance, they're incredible and they make a really big difference. But for the vast majority of pack rafters, all they use is that inflation bag. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And another question from Soren for Sam. What model of Alpaca will you recommend for bike fishing expeditions, not for dangerous waters?
Yeah, I think Cam touched on that, I think just slightly, but what I would say is just people tend to oversize their boats a little bit. Same reason for bike packing. It gets kind of your gear out a little farther in front of you, just gives you a little more operating room. So the Caribou is a great choice. But some people, if you're doing a ton of fishing, people like the self-bailing floors, which means basically if water comes in, it just drains out the bottom. So from a fishing perspective, you land a fish, you build some kind of a decking system, or there are some aftermarket versions available. You land it, it's all slimy, you got stuff going on or whatever, or you're in and out of the boat with waders. You can just grab some water and splash down the mess you've just made, and drains right out the bottom. So for those reasons, some of the self-bailing boats are great. And as Cam mentioned, there's a new boat called the Ranger. It's built as like the big, extra, extra large kind of one-person hunting boat or fishing boat. And it's already been super popular, and it literally launched a week ago. So yeah, there's lots of changes happening as always with Alpaca.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And for Mark, how do you inflate the boat? Do you have to carry the pump?
Oh yeah, that's I already answered that. It's the bag system. Or there is also, you can also buy like little very ultralight USB powered electronic pumps for like roadside, or if you're not going into the backcountry, there's little great things like that too.
Yeah, actually, one other thing that we've been using a lot is like anyone who owns cordless drills of any kind, you can buy like miniature leaf blowers. They're normally about 100 to 150 bucks, and depending on the brand, and they are by far the fastest roadside top up, and they just run off of like a I have a Milwaukee setup, so off my Milwaukee like drills, it is so clean, and it's what we use in the shop to like inflate them and service them, and our rentals coming back for cleaning them, all that kind of stuff. They're the fastest system. So for roadside, those are a great choice.
Mm-hmm. From Robin, where can we look at these boats?
Where are you located, Sam?
Down there?
This is Vancouver.
Oh no, sorry. Yeah, so the best place to go, because I think Sam's having internet trouble again, but they definitely have a few models on the floor at Mount Waddington Outdoors, which is out in Chilliwack on Vetter Road, kind of near the Chilliwack River. And so that's the only spot that I know that will have alpacas on there. There's been I know that a number of places in the city have started carrying Kokopelli. So Valhalla Pure has had them. I think I saw them on MEC's website recently, so they might. I have no idea. They have not stocked Packrafts in the past. But if you want to see the sort of range of alpaca boats, you can check out Alpaca's website or head out to Mount Waddington's. And then if you're in the city and you want to see Kokopelli boats, I know Valhalla Pure had them in stock last year, and I think plans to stock them again this year.
And I think that's all the questions we have for tonight. Well, thank you very much, Cam and Sam, for showing us about Pancrafting. It sounds interesting. I think I might get into it. Sounds fun.
I just also want to say that, I think the BCMC is very appreciative of the courses and that Cam has brought to the BCMC for the last couple of years, especially as sport literally has emerged before from nothing to something flourishing and popular. So thank you, Cam, for supporting our membership in this new sport, and hopefully you felt in kind we supported you.
Yeah, it's going to be a very popular sport activity. Okay, well, thanks again for doing the presentation, and of course, thank you for all the participants for coming to the March Socials. Before we sign off, just a reminder of the April Socials on April the 13th, which is by Sean Leung, a former member of BCMC. and he will take us on mountain adventures around the world. So don't miss that one. I hope to see all of you next month. And until then, stay safe and see you all very soon.